Hello everyone. What I'd like to do today is to talk to you about where you can get data and examine data and do this online without having to invest in software. So what I'd like you to do first is when you go to the Moodle page, you notice that I've placed a link here for a website, SDA data website. SDA stands for Survey Documentation and Analysis. It's run out of UC Berkeley, and for us it's going to be helpful because what they've done is they've taken two data sets that are important for social science research and they've placed them online. In addition to putting the data online, they also have the code book, I'll explain that in a minute, and allow you to complete some very elementary analysis online. Although what you're going to learn in this class will allow you to do it on your own rather than relying on the computer. So to start, I'd like to show you the two main data sets that we are going to use in this class. The first one is known as the General Social Survey. The GSS has been around since the early 1970s, and fortunately for us, this data tends to ask the same question year after year. So if we wanted to study how a phenomenon has changed over time, we can do that. I'm going to click on this initial release of the 1972 to 2016 data and wait for the website to come up. Now in this workspace, you'll notice over here on the right side of the screen, you have where you can create tables, you can calculate means, you can run a correlation matrix, and then towards the end over here you can do ordinary least squares regression and maximum likelihood versions of logit and probit. I don't tend to do a lot of analysis online. I have the specialized software in order to do my own analysis. As a social scientist, it's just one of those things that we're expected to use. But for me, I like to use the GSS website and the NES version of this just to look at data and for our classes find examples of variables and talk about concepts. So I'm going to stick over here with this tables tab. You notice up top we have separate links for the standard code book. Over here on the left side, they've taken the variables and they've classified them together in some instances by year. So in 2012 they ran a topical module on Jewish identity, generosity, workplace violence, science, one on skin tone, and then up top here they have these variables that are run every year. So let's take a look at respondent background variables. If we click on that, we can see, let's click on the first one. So let's start with age. I'm going to click on age. Age is the age of the respondent. The respondent is the person that answers the question in the survey. And I clicked on it and you notice that it typed itself in up here, so it selected age. And if I click on view, it's going to pull the data up into this pop-up window. Here we go. It's going to give us a description of the variable, which with a simple variable like this, it just says respondent's age. And then it's going to show us in the data set, right, this large cumulative data file from 1972 to 2016, it's going to show us in this frequency table how often it gets each value. So you notice it starts at 18. So we're not asking minors these survey questions. It starts at 18 And in all the years of the survey, 219 people have responded to the questions. We scroll all the way down. We can see that this data set contains 62,000 variables containing a measure of age. Now, you will also notice that not only are 18-year-olds the first age, but anything after 89, they've combined together into 89 or older. So they've got a category here of 89 or older, and it's 335 people. The numbers here for 98, which one person responded that they didn't know. So imagine you don't know your age. This is actually not all that odd. My grandmother doesn't know her age, and not because she's senile, but because her birth certificate is smudged and they can't read it. So she says she's 99. She could be 100. We don't actually know. So there's my grandma right there. She's the one person that doesn't know. 99 is the code that's used for not applicable. I can't imagine what scenario in which it would be not applicable, but 220 respondents were not applicable. So this is the data. It's a numeric form of data, which means that there's numbers in the fields. It tells us which codes they use for missing data, which is that we don't have a good answer and we shouldn't use the data if it has these numbers. And here it's going to give us some summary statistics, like the mean. The average respondent's age in the General Social Survey is about 46 years old. The standard deviation, looking at the spread of this, is 17.5. So the average person, the average response for age difference from age of 46 is 17. So we'll get to this in week 4. All right. And it tells us here again which data file we're using. So right now we have this summary of the variable. We don't actually have the data yet, but we can look at it, we can do an initial examination of it. We can see that for the most part, somewhere between 0.5% and 2%. Looks like the most is right around this 2.2% of the data set. So lots of respondents are between 24 and 40. All right. Lots of respondents. Okay. So that's a simple variable like age. We can take a look at another one. Click off it. Let's select sex. You notice that it changed up here, and we can take a look at that one as well. It's going to bring this pop-up window back, and it's going to say, all right, here's your variable. It's called sex, and it is a code of the respondent's sex. And this one is pretty simple. Again, like a dummy variable, it's binary. You either have an option for male or an option for female. Nothing that overly complicates it. We're not going to bring in transgender or any other forms of sex. We're going to keep it binary. And the respondents, 44% are male, 56% are female. All right. You notice that they coded this as a 1 or a 2. If this were a dummy variable, we would have the name of the variable be male, and it would be a 1 and a 0. Or conversely, we could dummy variable this as female and make the females 1 and the males 0. It's completely up to you, but as a dichotomous variable, these are the two options that we have. Let's look for something for a little bit more complicated and see. Let's look at education. Think of how is it that we can measure education? Well, what they've done is take a look at view. They've measured education here as the highest grade that you finished and got credit for. So how many years of school did you complete? So in this survey, 161 people claimed not to have completed school, any school year. And then you have some people claim to have completed 20 school years. So not only did they go to college, so we get most people, they say, well, I finished the 12th grade. Here's our high school graduates, another 4 years for college. And then we have some people that either took longer or maybe went and got a graduate degree. I'm guessing, right? I'm trying to make sense of how they measured it. They measured it in number of years completed. I might have measured it by degrees earned. And if we click over here, we can see that there's a different variable for degree. If you finished high school, did you ever get a diploma or GED certificate? Well, that's not what I expected. But what we have here for answers is we have some people who say that they have a bachelor's degree, and here's a graduate degree. Okay. Again, it gives us the actual data number assigned, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, and 9. They also tell us down here that 7 is a missing value. So if I'm going to recode this data or download it to my computer, I need to take note of this information. All right. So when I'm talking to students about their papers, I always tell them just poke around. Just open up a data set and take a look and see what you find. And look for a question that you want to know why people are asking or answering this question in a different way. So let's say we'll click down to controversial social issues. And there's some fun stuff in here, sex, pornography, violent experiences, and there's one here, child discipline. There's a variable called spanking. And you're not allowed to write this paper. You have to prove to me that you have some research interest in families and parenting. But you can't write this paper, but this is the example that I like to use. I always wondered, is there any relationship to either gender, race, socioeconomic status, education, as to why some parents spank their children and others don't? This is a personal curiosity. I have children. My wife and I have had conversations about whether or not we should physically harm our children or we should discipline them toughly. We've decided not to spank them, but I'm wondering, who are these people? Why do people have different viewpoints on this? And there in the GSS is this variable about spanking, and we can see that they have done this in an ordinal fashion from strongly disagree, disagree, agree, or strongly agree. Now you'll notice that it's either agree or disagree. So if you wanted to, you could recode this variable as favor spanking. So yes, spank. And say a 1 and a 2, make it a dummy variable. These are the people that believe in spanking. It is about, let's see, 73%. And you have about 80%, sorry, I'm doing math in my head real quick, 26.5%, it's 27% that disagree with spanking. So what are the differences between these two groups? So if I'm going to use this as a dependent variable, I'm going to think about what are some of the potential causes. And like I said, I can go back to my respondent background variables. I can look at some of the other variables that are in here. Income, whether or not they vote, voting patterns. I'm going to just expand a bunch of these. Wonder if there's some sort of like children are our future variable. Sometimes you call spanking corporal punishment. Maybe your attitudes towards military and toughness might influence spanking. I can look at maybe it has to do with traditional views of the family. So there's questions here about roles of men and women in the family. Okay. Maybe it has to do with whether or not you think you're a feminist or not, or whether or not women should work full-time. Again, the idea behind using this data set and this website specifically is that the interactive nature of it will allow you to see what variables are available, pull them up, do an initial look at the data, see how they've coded it, see if you would code it differently. But you have access to this. This is free and available. So when you come to me and you say, Dr. Wood, I don't know what to write my paper on, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sit down, we're going to come to this website, and I'm going to ask you, what are you interested in? What sounds like a puzzle that you want to solve? I really like the GSS, but I'm a political scientist, and I want to show you our other data set that's available on this website. And that's the American National Election Studies. The NES, for short, has been taking place since 1948. And every 2 to 4 years, mostly 4 years to match the presidential cycle. Sometimes they've done it in the off years. But every 4 years, they survey the American electorate and ask them questions about the upcoming election. And so here's some relatively recent data in the last 6 months on 2016. Let's see what they've released. I'm going to expand these if I can. The other interesting thing about the American National Election Study is that they do both surveys before and after the election. All right. So here's pre-election questions, so before we know who was going to win. Here's my favorite. Feeling thermometers. Okay. We can ask you questions about your feelings toward the individual candidates or the parties themselves. So this is going to be, as a thermometer, we'll generally have it on a scale of 0. Scroll down, it should go to 100. 100 being hot means you do like them. 0 being freezing cold, don't like them. And we can, this is the feeling thermometer toward the Democratic presidential candidate, which at this time was Hillary Clinton. One thing I want to point out with the with the NES, the data that we're looking at right now, is they have these awful variable names. V for variable and then a number. The GSS is nice because it has an actual name. So the spanking variable is spanking. The gender variable is sex. All of these national election studies variables, they're all V and then a 6-digit code. You'll find that you'll probably want to take notes in a notebook about which each variable number is. Let's see. This is centered around political participation. So we can ask people questions about what activities they engage in. Here we have examples of whether or not they voted in a primary. We can also ask them questions about their previous voting behavior. Here we're looking at did you vote in the last election? So we've got 4,000 respondents. 73% of the people who responded said that they voted in the last election. We know voting turnout is not that high. So some of these people could have lied, or given the fact that sometimes we do these election studies around the time of an election, people might want to appear like they are going to vote in the next election. There's always the potential for people to lie to us. But here we have 26% who say, no, I didn't vote. And if we look at the post-election questions, so the ones that we do afterwards, a lot of these are the exact same. Maybe we can find whether or not they voted in this election or not. Here it is. Did you vote in 2016? And wait for it to pull up. So 73% said that they voted, and 86%, great turnout among our survey respondents, said that they voted in 2016. So one of the people, mythical people out there to explain how Trump won this election was the idea that some people who voted for Obama in 2012 changed and voted for President Trump in 2016. Well, we can identify those people in this data set. We can download the data for respondents' votes, and we can match up those that said they voted for Obama in 2012 or said that they voted in 2012 and compare those to who they voted for in 2016. We could also ask another question. Who is it that either Trump or Clinton motivated to vote? So you compare non-voters in 2012 to look at the people who did vote in 2016. That's going to require just a little bit of data analysis, but it's available. And another way to think about how am I going to find something interesting to study. Okay. Again, with the national election studies, we get lots of people's opinions on different policies. So here's one on gun control. And not only does it ask, what is your position on the issue? So should the federal government make it more difficult to buy a gun? More, easier, or the same? But they also ask, okay, you have this viewpoint. Is it important to you? How important is this issue to you? So we can see whether or not people who hold opinions more strongly, what affects that amount? Who are the people that really think it's important to have access to a gun? Or who, conversely, who are the people that think it's really important to restrict access? Do you think that a person would be more or less likely to vote if they believe that voting is a duty, or is it a choice, and how strongly they hold those beliefs? Do you think a person would be more or less likely to vote if they were a member of a political party? Do they think that they're a member of either the Democratic or Republican Party? Lots of theories about why people act the way they do in politics. This data allows us political scientists to test these. Another thing that I always have found interesting about the political behavior literature is that we actually do try to measure whether or not people are knowledgeable about politics. And so in the NES, what they've done is they've asked people knowledge questions. So we can take a look here and see how many people know how many people know the term of office for a United States senator? The answer is 6 years. Each senator has a 6-year term. But you notice some people here thought, I don't know, 50. I mean, I understand incumbents are in office for a long time, but 50 seems like a ridiculous answer and a really bad guess. 8 years, 4 years, maybe they got confused with a member of House every 2 years. All right, so you can build a how knowledgeable are people question. Sum this up, see if they get the correct answers or not. All right, so that's these two data sets, and I really believe that the best thing to do is to go to the website, take a look at them, surf around, look for different questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the GSS, and I'm going to show you very quickly how to download data to your computer and how to take a look at it now. Okay. So the two variables that I want to download, and if you look up here, you have some options. One is I can do an analysis, and that's this over here. I can create new variables. And it'll say, okay, we'll create a new variable for you. How do you want us to do it? Or I can download a subset. So I can take this huge data set and I can download part of it. Here's how I want to download it. You'll notice it gives you options in terms of the file that it gives you. I'm going to ask for a CSV, a comma separated value. This is the easiest thing for Excel to read and you not screw up. I also want the code book for the data, so I want them to generate something that gives me the various values for the labels. I can also get data definitions for SAS, SPSS, Stata. Stata is the program that I use. It's about $300. So it's not really something you guys are going to do. You can filter variables out, but I just want to go ahead and select the variables. And I know that I want sex, I want spanking, and I'm going to do year because I want to know if over time these trends have changed. And I'm going to create my file. It says show list of all variables. And here are the 3 variables that I told it I wanted, and create the file. And now I just sit and I wait. I wait for the website to pull these things together. It's ready to download, and I have 2 links here. I can download the data file. Here it is, sub-data 6, so you can see that I've done this a few times. And my code book. I'll download the code book as well. Sub codebook -1. And the code book's available. I can go ahead and open that. Here it is. Just a little text file. And it tells me, alright, you downloaded the sex variable. 1's male, 2 is female. You downloaded the spanking variable, and you got your strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. And then finally I downloaded the year variable, and that's just a numeric year. So I'm going to probably print this out, keep it on my computer. The next thing I do is my data, and if I just open it up using the text pad, you can see it has, scrolling down, make this a little bigger, here we have 62,466 observations. So each one of these rows is an observation. It's a person over the years from 1972 to 2016 that have answered these questions. Okay. But I can't really work with the data here in Notepad. So I'm gonna save this. Save as. I'm going to call this my spanking data. And if I haven't worked with data before, I call it clean. This is my clean spanking data. I haven't done anything to it. I'm going to go ahead and save it to my desktop. Okay, now I want to look at this data and sort it and manipulate it. So I'm going to open up Excel. Put it in this window. And I'm going to tell it, okay, open up from my desktop. Sorry, I got a messy desktop. Here it is, spanking data clean. It's a text file, so I had to go over in my options and say, look at all files. And it's going to say, all right, but this doesn't look like an Excel file. How do you want to bring it in? Well, it's a delimited file because it has a character such as a comma separating each field. So I want it delimited, and I want it to start import at the first row. Okay, but my data has headers, so I'm going to tell it that because that's what these are: case ID, sex, spanking year. Now it's a comma separated, so I have to change it to comma. Take the tab out. And there's a little preview window here, and just scroll down and make sure that everything looks like it's staying within these columns. Okay, and I'm going to click next, and this screen lets you select each column and set the data format. I'm just going to leave it as it is and hit finish, and here's my data. So case number, so each individual person, their gender, their answer to the spanking question, and the year. Now if I want to recode this data, if I want to take sex and I want to create a new variable, well, I'm going to stop here. I'm actually not going to show you how to do that. That's going to come later in the semester. I don't want you playing with the data quite yet. I want you to understand what it is. I want you to know where you can go ahead and get some for yourself. And later in the semester, when we talk about how we're going to analyze our data, one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, which is the most accurate format to use? And depending upon the format that we select, right, the theory behind why we've chosen a dummy variable that's dichotomous over an ordinal variable, that might cause us to recode this in a different way. So I just want to start, considering it's week 3 of classes, show you that there's lots of data out there. You don't have to dread about the idea of collecting your own. If you're starting to think about, well, I got to write a term paper in this class, go ahead and use some time from today to go to the GSS or the NES using that Berkeley website that's linked in our Moodle page, and just start soaking around and looking for data to use. So again, this SDA website, there's a link right here in Moodle, SDA data website. Once you're in there, the data itself is housed in the archive, and it gives you the General Social Survey and the American National Election Study. There are other data sets in here, but these are the 2 that are the most useful and that I suggest you take a look at. So go ahead and do that, and next week we're going to talk about summarizing our data, looking for its measure of central tendency. So what value best represents this data, whether it's gender, spanking, or anything else. Right? So that's today's video for this week. Please use the website. Get comfortable with it. We're going to reference it a lot in class, and it's going to be valuable for you not only for this class, but also in your other classes and papers that you do in the future. And with that, talk to you next time.